thank you all for coming. I will ask, I know that there are a lot of miscommunications about where the debate was being held, and so I appreciate you all working with us as to finding the actual location, and thank you for showing up. It's great to have an engaged community, and it's great to be able to put this debate on. I will ask you all to please save your applause for the absolute end of the debate. There will be no questions, again, asked from the audience, although I do have all of your questions here that you submitted on a note card. Not all questions will be answered because we are on a time limit. This debate does end at 7:30. And the doors promptly close then as well. So if you could all enter out at the cafeteria, which is exactly where you came in as well. Bathrooms are located to the left outside the store, just wrap right around the corner if you do need to use them. And I want to say that this debate is presented by Leadership MWV, which is currently taking applications for the 2015 season. If you or anyone you know is interested in applying, you can visit www.mwvyp.com. It's a great program to enhance your career philanthropically or professionally. It's a great networking program as well. It's a network for developing professionals, providing opportunities for mentorship, for community involvement, and support for civic leadership. It is generously sponsored by the Bank of New Hampshire, with supporting sponsorship by Mountain View Grand, scholarship sponsorships by North Conway Rotary, Kiwanis Club of Mount Washington Valley, the Mount Washington Valley Economic Club, Mount Washington Valley Economic Council, and the Mount Washington Valley Chamber of Commerce. It aims to facilitate knowledge transfer, creating an opportunity for hands-on learning with an emphasis on generating new participation on local boards, providing one-to-one mentorship by existing community leaders to up-and-coming professionals and citizens, and empowering those with leadership capabilities to act effectively to help solve local problems. We've been lucky enough to visit the State House. I do see some of our representatives. We have Representative Butler, we have Representative Umberger here, who was actually kind enough to take in our leadership group from last year and give them a tour of the State House. Jed Bradley's met with our leadership professionals in the past as well, and so we're all very, very happy to have your support. So, without further ado, I would like to open the debate with 5-minute opening remarks from our candidates, starting with Senator Bradley.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for being here, and thank you to the Mount Washington Valley Chamber of Commerce for sponsoring this debate. My name is Jeb Bradley, and it's been an honor to have served as your state senator over the last 6 years, and I look forward to representing all of Carroll County, the towns of Milton, Middleton, and Waterville Valley again in the State House. My wife Barbara and I live in Wolfboro. We are the very proud parents of 4 grown children, all of whom unfortunately live outside of New Hampshire. And we're also the extraordinarily happy grandparents of Amelia, who was born on Easter Sunday in April. So it's great to be a grandparent too. Barbara and I are either former or current small business owners. We owned a natural food store for many years in Wolfboro. I was a contractor, and she now currently owns an art gallery in Wolfboro. So I know what it means to be a small business owner, to face the pressures that small business owners face, in particular, meeting a payroll. So why am I running? 3 reasons, and quite frankly, they've been the same reasons that I've run for this office in the past. While we have a relatively low unemployment rate, which I believe is a result of wise decisions that I have always supported over the years to never have an income tax or a sales tax, there's a lot more that we need to do to grow jobs, not only here in the Valley or in the Lakes region, but all across New Hampshire. We have significant disincentives right now. We have among the highest business taxes in the United States. We have very high unemployment insurance costs. We have high workers' compensation costs. When those are combined with our high electricity costs and our high health care costs, I think you can see why it's a disincentive to grow a business here or to relocate from another state to New Hampshire. I was recently endorsed by the National Federation of Independent Businesses because I bring a pro-jobs agenda to the State House, and that's exactly what I'll continue to do over the next 2 years. My second top priority, we have to protect taxpayers. That should go without saying, And we've done a budget reset in the state of New Hampshire over the last 4 years, thankfully. And it's critically important, at least in my humble opinion, that we not spend ourselves to an income tax, a sales tax, or God forbid, both. And my third top priority, as one of the architects of the education funding formula that passed and was implemented into law in 2011 that ended donor towns, I want to make sure as a member of the Senate that we never allow donor towns to come back to the state of New Hampshire. It's been, as I said before, an honor. It's been a pleasure to have served in a number of different capacities over the years. When I was a member of the New Hampshire House, I led efforts to lower air pollution, and 10 or 12 years ago to lower electric rates when they were sky high. As a member of Congress, I fought for better veterans health care, and twice was honored as the VFW, that's Veterans of Foreign Wars, of New Hampshire, their Citizen of the Year, twice for my efforts on veterans health care. I'm proud of the fact that, along with other members of the Maine and New Hampshire congressional delegation, we worked in a bipartisan fashion when the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard was under dire threat of closure and 5,000 jobs were threatened. We worked in a bipartisan fashion to save those 5,000 jobs. And here a little bit closer to home, I worked to make sure that the Wild River Wilderness was created, as well as an expansion of the Sandwich Wilderness. As a member of the Senate, I've led efforts for that budget reset that I talked about, and in fact, the last budget didn't raise a single fee or tax and passed on a bipartisan 24-0 vote. When property taxes were going higher and higher because of soaring retirement costs, I led efforts for reform. And when we needed to protect 500 jobs in the forest products industry in the North Country, that was my legislation that got the job done. So as I said, it's been an honor and a pleasure to serve. I ask for your vote on November 4th. I tried to listen and use practical common sense to tackle tough challenges, and I look forward to answering your questions. Oh, and if you want more information, www.jebforstatesenate.com. Thanks so much, and thanks again for sponsoring this debate.
Thank you so much, Senator Bradley. I now open the remarks to candidate John White.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming, and thank you to the Chamber for doing this. My name is John R. White. My background is newspapers, not politics. I worked for 33 years for the Boston Globe, was consumer-oriented, started a consumer column there, possibly the first in the country. I had worked in a number of small papers before going to the Globe. My final assignment at the Globe, which lasted more than 20 years, was as automotive editor and columnist, another consumer-oriented job. I'm a people guy. I like working with people. I like solving problems with people. I was married. I am now divorced. My ex-wife and I are on pretty good terms. We have 2 grown children. Like Senator Bradley, they have fled the nest. They're not in New Hampshire. And like Senator Bradley, I am a proud grandfather of a grandson. From there, the similarities pretty much end. Senator Bradley and I have different viewpoints on a number of things. I'm not scared of taxes, and I'm not in favor of raising taxes. That said, you got to pay for what you got. You got to pay for the government. You got to pay for the infrastructure. If you go out on the East Conway Road, it's not exactly a tourist attraction if they're driving. There are a lot of roads up in this neck of the woods and down in my area that are in pretty bad shape. That's not exactly an attraction for tourists. Carroll County relies heavily on the tourist business. We're not doing so well in New Hampshire. In 2007, the poverty rate was about 7%. Now it's 10%. The minimum wage in New Hampshire is now at the federal level, $7.25. We had a higher one. The the last legislature knocked it down. I don't know how you survive on $7.25. And poor people can't really support prosperity. I would support raising the minimum wage. That's a priority of mine. I would go to $11. I can hear the gasps. That's not much money. It's not a living wage, but it's a better floor, a more reasonable floor than $7.25. Who gets the minimum wage in New Hampshire? It's not just teenagers. Not at all. 59% of women. 14% of those people have children. Most of them are full-time. 72%, I believe it is, are over 20. It's not teenagers. It's working families, struggling with 2 jobs, 3 jobs. There's something seriously wrong when the richest corporation in the United States offers as an employee benefit help with getting food stamps. Senator Bradley and I'm sure you'll find tonight, differ on a lot of things. But I want to go to Concord to combat the extreme that has infiltrated both parties, not just the Republicans. I can only say that if we get another O'Brien House, if we get another Republican Senate, we are in danger of losing the Medicaid expansion that we have. 15,000 people have signed up, 22,000 approximately are eligible, but the bill must be reauthorized. At the end of 2016, it sunsets. I believe that was Senator Bradley's amendment. If the extreme wing of the Republican Party is in control, they will not reauthorize. And those people will be back without insurance, and we'll have to pay for it. Is that the signal? I'll end there.
Thank you. We're going to open the debate now with questions that were all submitted by everyone in this room, as well as people that emailed me as well. We'll get 2-minute answers with a 1-minute rebuttal. I'd like to open the door with the first question, which is, New Hampshire's workforce law, enacted in 2010, ensures reasonable and realistic opportunities for the development of workforce housing. This law works to our advantage as we are trying to attract young families. However, each year, the workforce housing law, RSA 674-58-61, is challenged by legislators. Will you support New Hampshire's workforce housing law if elected? We'll start with you, John White.
The short answer to that is yes. In Wolfboro, we have affordable housing for the workforce. It was built in spite of a clamor of a minority of the town which didn't want it. It never ceases to amaze me that people who want to employ low-wage people, who want to employ the handymen, who want to employ the drivers, who want to employ the waitresses and the waiters, don't want to live near them. I don't get it. If we have no place for people to live in affordable housing, who will mow our lawns, tend our children? Who will service at the restaurants? Who will be working in the tourist industry? Who? We have to have affordable housing for workers who are not making great money. Not all of us can be rich, not all of us can be middle class, but all of us at least should have a decent place to live and enough money to live on. It's part of the American dream, which has been sadly tarnished of late.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I actually supported the workforce housing bill, and I believe, if I remember, there was a repeal effort that took place in 2011 in the House. When it came to the Senate, we stopped that repeal effort. Workforce housing was a priority of the Business and Industry Association, the largest group that represents, quite frankly, the people that grow jobs in this state. And it's also a priority for small business owners so that their employees have the ability to live in affordable housing. Small business is the backbone of New Hampshire, and so, of course, we need a workforce housing law. So, as I said, when it came to the Senate, in an effort to repeal it, that repeal effort died.
Thank you. Second question. State roads bring visitors to towns throughout the Mount Washington Valley, yet funding for fixing the roads is sorely lacking. Beyond the gas tax, how do you suggest we solve New Hampshire's revenue issue so that the state can ensure that its infrastructure is an asset, not a liability?
Thank you very much. That is an excellent question. The legislature, not with my vote, did pass a 4-cent increase in the gas tax this year. But I think that, especially since that debate is over, we should look to my legislation, which passed the Senate, unfortunately was rejected in the House, that would stop the diversion of highway fund dollars that are supposed to be dedicated to roads and bridges, but are going for other purposes. Some $80 million goes from the highway fund, most of it to the Department of Safety, but also other state departments. No wonder why people are skeptical about raising taxes when they see their tax dollars that are supposed to go for business, to repair roads and bridges are being diverted for other purposes. So my legislation would have called for an end to that diversion over 2 budgets so that there would be time for other state departments to make the kind of adjustments that are necessary. That $80 million will, in large measure, plug the hole that is expected in the Department of Transportation. And so, if I am fortunate enough to return to Concord, that will be one of the first pieces of legislation I submit, and I suspect it will be part of the Senate budget. And I hope my colleagues in the House this time will work with me to pass this very important legislation. Thank you.
Thank you. John?
First of all, the raise in the gas tax was 4.2 cents. A 23% increase in what we pay is known as a road toll, a use tax. 23%. It's been since 1991, I believe, since it was last raised. And since then, the price of asphalt has gone up 400%. Price of road salt has gone up 300%. Price of everything has gone up. You can't build a mile of road for the same money you used to. We're woefully underfinanced. As far as diversions go, I don't know where this word diversion comes from. The gas tax and the other taxes raised by automobile levies, such as registration fees and others, that goes for roads, and it's written in the Constitution that it goes for road, other than just road betterment and road building, it goes for road maintenance, it goes for road safety, it goes for the Department of Safety who mans the roads. Now, it is urgent that we build the infrastructure. I would point out that since we raised the gas tax, that 4.2 cents, over the objections of Senator Bradley and some others, who said it was too much to put onto the price of gas. The price of gas has dropped 30 cents. Has anybody noticed that 4.2 cents? For somebody driving about 20,000 miles a year, that 4.2 cents represents less than $15. But if you don't pay for the roads, if you don't find the money for the roads, then, like me, you'll be paying for broken tie rods, broken rims, ruptured tires, and other little parts and pieces that get pounded off the car. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on now to some questions on climate change, seeing as when you drive your car, we add to climate change. So, do you support the continued participation in the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative? Kennett, John White.
Yes.
Thank you. Concise.
There's been an awful lot of controversy about the money that was dispensed from the Regional Greenhouse Gas, or RGGI program. When dollars are going, at least in my humble opinion, to some of the largest companies in the state of New Hampshire, some of the most profitable companies like the state of New Hampshire, Stonyfield Farms, or to institutions of higher learning like Dartmouth that have a huge endowment, to me, well, pardon me if I think it's extreme to protect taxpayers, but that's what we had to do with the RGGI program, and thankfully the legislation, amendments to legislation that I sponsored, have put not only a lid on RGGI expenditures so that they can't go to some of these programs that were not well thought out, but a lot of that money is actually being returned to each and every one of you in this room today as lower electric rates. And given the fact that we have among the highest electric rates in the country, I think it's long overdue that we protect taxpayers by returning some of this money to you, and even more importantly, because high electric rates are so crucial to business development and quite frankly, a disincentive to business development, this is one way that we can return money to businesses and lower at least a little bit their electric rates. I will continue to fight to make sure that that taxpayer protection stays in the RGGI program.
Thank you. I would like to offer candidate John White a 1-minute rebuttal if you'd like to take it.
I don't find much to disagree with there. So I'll pass on the rebuttal and let's get on to more questions.
Sounds good. Thank you. Do you think that the U.S. should be energy independent, especially from the Middle East? And if so, how would you suggest that it be accomplished?
Well, these are, when you talk about energy independence, a lot of these are national issues, whether we build, for instance, the Keystone Pipeline, whether we authorize drilling for oil in Alaska or off our coastal shores more than we already allow. The fact of the matter is, technology has allowed us to produce much more American oil. That's a good thing. However, in New Hampshire, as I was just talking about, we have extraordinarily high electricity costs, and so we need more supply of electricity in New Hampshire. But, in my opinion, especially as we're here in the Mount Washington Valley or among other regions of the state, that large transmission lines are proposed that would have 130-foot towers, that will minimize people's property value. I think that things like Northern Pass, which we need, there's no question we need it, have to be buried. I've led efforts to make sure that Northern Pass is buried in the most sensitive areas, and I'll go back and fight for that, because as somebody who enjoys hiking in our White Mountains and quite frankly all over the state, this is a very real issue. A lot of people think that we should have windmills up and down the state of New Hampshire with a 30% capacity factor. In other words, they only blow, the wind only blows some of the time, so it's heavily subsidized, it's highly expensive, and if you go over to Newfound Lake where people have to put up with these contraptions, they're not working most of the time, or much of the time, and again, totally diminished property values. And I led efforts to pass Senate Bill 281 that will provide for better siting regulations of windmills. We need alternative energy, we need new traditional sources of energy, but we also need to protect the people that live in New Hampshire, and I'll lead that effort again. Thank you.
Thank you. John White?
Senator Bradley, you have to stop doing this to me. I can't stand all the agreement. The idea of alternative power is not just some far-fetched scheme. It's going to be an absolute necessity sooner or later, and we might as well get onto it sooner. It is my view that the research has been ignored because the oil industry is doing quite well and is supplying us with fossil fuels quite well. We don't know what environmental cost. You've all heard the term fracking. There's some question as to whether that is safe for the water supplies. I'd rather know before the water is polluted and people have nothing to drink than after. We have seen oil spills and broken pipelines. Sooner or later, folks, we have to get off the oil fix. We have to find another way to produce energy, and a lot of it. And it's not going to be windmills, and it's not just going to be water power, and it's not just going to be the transmission line from Canada. I wholeheartedly agree with Senator Bradley that before they run anything down through New Hampshire, they get it out of sight, because in northern New Hampshire, about the only thing they have left is the view, and that's their industry. I don't believe that we will get anywhere with the oil, with the alternative energy to replace oil until there is a tax on oil to fund it. And we stop giving away taxpayer money as subsidies to the oil companies. Yes, it will raise energy prices, but that is the incentive we need to get off the oil fix.
Thank you. You just feel the energy radiating from the room. It's palpable. Last question on climate change, or climate condition. If elected, will you support the SB 60 Commission recommendations to fund the state aid grant programs for public water, wastewater, stormwater, infrastructure funding, and establish a reliable trust fund for that revenue? Candidate White?
Short answer, yes.
Thank you. Senator Bradley?
Thank you very much. I'd like to return just for one moment to the last question. In a region of the country that depends on oil as we're going into winter heating, and as somebody who fought for the low-income heating assistance dollars when I was a member of Congress, I can tell you, if you send me back to Concord, there won't be a tax on oil as my opponent has just proposed. Now, in terms of funding for water resources, I saw my good friend Bill Hounsell here. He's somewhere here. I worked with Bill in the last budget cycle to restore cuts that Governor Lynch made to the 20%, or in the case of the Mount Washington Valley, it's actually a 30% funding for the water systems that are being built now. That funding had been taken away by Governor Lynch and budget writers several years ago. We restored it, and Mr. Hounsell told me that that first check has come to the Mount Washington Valley area. What we need to find is a dedicated way to pay for the state aid grant for water, and that's something that we'll have to work to do. Thank you.
I would like to open it up.
May I have 30 seconds on the oil question?
You may.
Thank you.
On the business of the oil tax, whether I go to Concord or Senator Bradley returns to Concord, the New Hampshire Senate will not be deciding that issue. That is a national issue for the Congress of the United States. So no matter what my views are on it, don't blame me for the tax, because I can't install it.
Senator Bradley, I just want to ask if you have any follow-up at all.
Well, yeah, there are a lot of taxes in New Hampshire. There's no reason if you send him to Concord, he couldn't submit legislation to tax home heating oil. He just proposed it. So I think there's a clear choice here. If you send me, that won't happen.
Okay, I think it's time to...
I did not propose a tax on home heating oil. Nor would I.
I think it's time to move on to, I just want to make sure that the original question, if elected, will you support the SB 60 Commission recommendations to fund the state aid grant programs for public wastewater, stormwater, infrastructure funding, and establish a reliable trust fund for that revenue, was answered in full by our candidates up front.
I said yes.
And I said yes.
They both said yes. So, moving on to a completely different topic. In the Mount Washington Valley, we have an issue with young people leaving after high school or college and not returning. Resulting in an aging population, what can state government do to attract and keep young professionals in New Hampshire? Senator Bradley.
Well, thank you very much. As the proud parent of 4 kids that live, 3 of whom live in Colorado and 1 live in Washington, I know what it means to have your family have left New Hampshire for better opportunities. So again, that gets back to my top priority, growing jobs. Not only do we need to make sure that we don't have an income tax or a sales tax, and I heard my opponent say he's not afraid of taxes before, and that brings a shudder to me if it means an income tax or a sales tax, because that would undermine what we have left of the New Hampshire advantage. So we need to go beyond that, though, and tackle all of those high-cost centers that I talked about before. High business taxes, the unemployment insurance tax is very high, workers' comp costs are high, energy costs, which we've already touched on. I'm sure there'll be some health care questions, but those costs are very high. If we are going to be a dynamic state that allows kids like mine, and I'm sure a lot of kids and grandkids like all of you here in the Mount Washington Valley, to stay here and to find good opportunities for high-paying jobs, we need to be more competitive. We need to face the fact that businesses are shying away from New Hampshire because we've overregulated and overtaxed. And so that's my top priority. That's why I want to return to the State House to continue to work on it, because growing jobs provides opportunity for all of us.
Thank you. Candidate White?
First step in growing jobs is to raise the minimum wage. When you give poor people money, they spend it because that's what they do. They need things. Now, you're not giving it to them, they're earning it. It's not tax money, it's earned money. But if we don't start somewhere developing a level of income that will attract people and a level of education that will attract employment, where children are going to continue to leave. There's nothing here to keep them here. Senator Bradley did vote for those dramatic, draconian education budgets back in the O'Brien legislature that slashed the education budget in half. If you cut education funding, you can't really educate your young people. Cutting taxes is not going to make jobs. This is a shibboleth that the Republican Party has offered us since Reagan invented trickle-down. Cutting taxes adds to the bottom line of the business. It adds to the compensation for the management of the business, but it doesn't spur investment, not at all, not now. And even Brown University economists have said that the real way to grow industry, to grow business, to grow the economy is to give the money, put it in the hands of the people who will spend it, and eliminate the middleman. We have to take a serious look at the infrastructure in New Hampshire. You will not get business to come here if the roads are bad and the bridges are rusty. If the first impression they see of New Hampshire is the lights are out on the bridges at night.
Thank you. I'd like to offer Senator Bradley a 1-minute rebuttal.
Thank you very much. I think if you compare New Hampshire to Texas, and you'll see a very different business regulatory climate and a lot more economic growth. But what I really want to do is talk for a moment about the minimum wage, and perhaps there'll be another question, but I travel all over this district, all over the state. I talk to an awful lot of small business owners. Small business owners are the backbone of the state of New Hampshire. And they tell me uniformly that if we have the highest labor costs in the United States of America, as my worthy opponent has proposed with an $11 an hour minimum wage, they're not going to be able to afford to hire people, to retain people, and in some cases, may go out of business. And the statistics back it up. The last time the minimum wage was raised, this country lost 300,000 jobs. And the Congressional Budget Office has said if we raise it again, we're going to lose 500,000 jobs. Unfortunately, raising the minimum wage is a job killer. We want to help people, not hurt them. Raising the minimum wage would hurt them.
Thank you. We do have a follow-up question on minimum wage. It says, please be specific. How will you create more jobs for the state and not just minimum wage jobs? Senator Bradley.
Well, again, you have to have, as I've stressed several answers already, the kind of business climate that attracts well-paid jobs, businesses to locate here. Whether it's people that want to start up businesses in their garage or whether it's major corporations, we need to attract them here. And so, yes, it's been good that we don't have an income tax or a sales tax, but as I've said before, that's not enough. We need to be competitive in a whole range of things. We have among the highest business taxes in the nation, the corporate tax. It's called the business profits tax. We have among the highest in the nation unemployment insurance tax, high workers' compensation costs, high health care, high energy costs. I mean, I know I sound like a broken record, but when you're a business leader that has to make investments in New Hampshire, you look at taxes, you look at costs, you look at energy, you look at health care, you look at the regulatory climate, and quite frankly, we are increasingly not competitive. And so we need a reset in some of these policies that have led to it. We need to do it carefully. We need to protect our budget. I'm proud that I not only worked to protect taxpayers in the last budget and, quite frankly, the previous budget from huge spending increases when we had a deficit, or again huge spending increases, but we can't spend our way to an income and sales tax. We have to be frugal with how we spend money, and that will hopefully allow us to lower some of these taxes, starting with the business profits tax. That's how we make New Hampshire competitive and we get good jobs in the state. We don't need more government mandates like my good friend would propose that will kill jobs. We need to create a climate that will grow jobs. That's a pretty big difference between the two of us.
Thank you. Candidate White?
Yes, it is a big difference, Senator. The fact of the matter is, in 13 states that raised the minimum wage since January 1st, 2014, the job growth has been higher in the states that raised the minimum than the states that stayed put, by a factor of 45.6%. As far as taxes go, Senator Bradley, yes, you have worked very hard to protect taxpayers, but not all of the taxpayers. Otherwise, we wouldn't have the tax imbalance we have. Under the current rickety system we have, those people making $20,000 or less are paying about 8 to 10% of their income in taxes. This section of the economy where they are making $1 million or more is paying 2% or less in taxes. Now, he has alluded to my proposals for income tax, and yes, I did. And this is it in a nutshell. I would have a state income tax, but not as an add-on. We're not going to add to what we got. It would have to be part of a complete tax overhaul for this state, and it would have to eliminate the state real estate tax, that portion of your real estate bill that the state now does. That would give homeowners in the low income brackets an immediate bit of tax relief. The minimum wage is the start. A little tax fairness would be in order in this state. Why is it that the lowest incomes pay the highest rates and the highest incomes pay the lowest rates? That's a fact, not my fancy.
Thank you. I'll ask both of the candidates up here to please be a bit more specific on how they will make efforts towards creating a warmer welcome for tech companies in the North Country of New Hampshire. Oh, I'm sorry, I should have gone to Candidate White, excuse me, sorry.
Well, first of all, we can start educating people for the jobs in tech companies. We should have much more money put to education in this state. Instead, we spend time arguing about education and balkanizing education and moving against the unions in education. Nobody's thinking about the students. Nobody's thinking about the future of the state. I would like to make tech companies welcome. They're going to have a cheaper source of power than we now offer. They're going to have roads that they can drive on. They're going to have educated people to hire. If we give them all of those things, they will come. You're not going to get them just on tax breaks. You're not going to get any long-term benefit by giving the state away to lure a business in today, and then they find out they really can't manage here and they go. We haven't really made this state that industry-friendly over the years. It's time to do so. But it's a very difficult task in a state where nobody wants the factory anywhere near them.
Thank you. Senator Bradley?
Thank you very much. The worst thing that we could do to close the door to new tech companies coming into New Hampshire is to pass an income tax. That would just be a job killer, along with some of the other job killers we've heard about. In terms of education, education is critically important. That's why I fought for a funding formula that ended donor towns, but met the state's need for an adequate education. It took almost 20 years to get to the point that we resolved the Claremont lawsuit. We have done that. Now, some would say that we should put more money into education. And you know, my top priority, along with job growth, is protecting taxpayers. But when revenues grow, as they did in 2013, we were able to restore significant funding to the university system. But unfortunately, in 2011, when we inherited a $900 million budget deficit, we had to make some pretty tough decisions, just as working families and small business owners around this state had to make some pretty tough decisions. But in 2013, this is why we passed a totally bipartisan budget that 24 out of 24 senators voted for. We met the needs of the state of New Hampshire, including higher education. It was a good thing. UNH froze tuition. I hope they continue to do it. And if revenues grow and we're able to meet our priorities, and obviously a critical one for me is funding roads and bridges, but if we can meet those priorities, I think we should dedicate more money to the university system. But the university system also has to continue to become more cost-effective and more efficient. Better use of technology, better use of distance learning. That's how you get to a win-win in this state. You protect taxpayers, but you meet the needs. And the university system has to do its fair share. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to open a one-minute rebuttal up to Candidate White.
This won't take a minute. If taxes scared off tech companies, California would be a desert. They got the highest taxes in the country, and they got the most in the way of technology industries.
Thank you. We've touched a lot about, I've heard the word education over and over again. I want to move on to some questions about that. The Robert Frost Charter School, which is a local charter school right in downtown North Conway, opened its doors 3 years ago in Conway. What are your positions on supporting existing charter schools and expanding the opportunity to open charter schools? Senator Bradley.
It's Mr. White's turn first. He just responded.
Okay, Candidate White, thanks for keeping me in line. I
I am not generally in favor of charter schools. because once you open them, you've got them. But to my way of thinking, charter schools were a way of balkanizing the public school system and avoiding the real issues. What's broken in the public school system should be fixed. If you have a leak in your barn, you don't build another barn. You fix the roof. It makes no sense to me to begin a competing school system and endow it with public funds when you already have a public school system. Fix what you've got. Take pride in it.
Thank you. Senator Bradley?
Well, this is another area where my friend Mr. White and I respectfully disagree. I absolutely support charter schools, and I fought for more funding for charter schools. Why? I'm a parent. I've had 4 kids, and the public school system is done well by my kids in most instances, but not every kid excels in a public school. Parents, kids need more opportunities. Charter schools, which are within the public school system in New Hampshire, provide one of those opportunities. I've also been a big proponent of homeschooling. That's another opportunity. We need to make sure that we have the best education system possible. We need accountability in our education system, and we need a little bit of competition. Charter schools and homeschooling provide that competition. I'll make sure that that Robert Frost school gets all the funding it needs, and if somebody else wants to open a charter school in Senate District 3, call me up, because I'll be fighting for your funding immediately. Thank you.
Thank you. Currently, SAU 9 is undergoing a strategic plan, and I want to touch a little bit more upon how the definition of adequate education has been determined in the Senate and how funding for that adequate education is developed. And then I'd like to turn it over to candidate White to talk about what he would do to implement a definition of adequate education going forward.
There was I think it was in 2007 and 2008, an adequacy commission that Senator Iris Estabrook of Durham chaired that did a very good job on a bipartisan basis of defining what adequacy was in the state of New Hampshire. So those discussions have largely occurred. Unfortunately, what came out of that discussion were donor towns, which even John Lynch didn't like. So in 2011, myself, Senator Rauch, she was the prime sponsor of the bill, Nancy Stiles, the 3 of us and several other people, Gene Chandler, sponsored a bill that updated that formula that got rid of donor towns. So I believe that we have a funding formula that works in the state of New Hampshire. We need, as I said, one of my 3 priorities is ensuring donor towns never come back. So we need vigilance there to make sure that that's the case, because throughout Carroll County, I believe in the last budget it would have been, donor towns would have cost Carroll County taxpayers about $8 million. That's wrong. I believe in local control. I think it's parents and educators and students that have to set the priorities, set the curriculum. Curriculum shouldn't be coming from Washington in our schools. These are decisions for parents, educators, and school board members. That's how we have the best possible education, I think, in New Hampshire. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate White?
Yeah, I'll leave it up to the parents. If you've got a school with 600 parents, you'll have 600 different opinions on what's going to be there. There has to be a curriculum. A lot of things have been ignored in education. We keep going back to discussing the elements, the 3 R's, and then the emphasis on arithmetic and mathematics, and then there's the emphasis on this and the emphasis on that. But the idea is to educate the whole child, mind, body, and soul. And along the way, we have dropped a lot of things. Language education is not at all what it used to be. It's very little choice anymore. Schools drop all sorts of courses for budgetary reasons. We don't have much in the way of physical education anymore. That money is spent on varsity teams and junior varsity teams, and a large part of the school body doesn't get any physical education. Music and art are scrapped as frills. They're not. What you learn, the discipline you learn in music is essential learning. It's how to study, how to work with other people, how to do and do and do and practice and have patience and keep at it. A lot of the qualities you need to succeed in any endeavor. But we forget that. We follow fashions. We need another look at education. We are not doing the proper job. I think maybe we should start asking the teachers who actually have the job what they should be doing or what they should be teaching.
Thank you. I would like to open up for a 1-minute rebuttal for Mr. Bradley.
Thank you very much. I just want to stress that with decisions like language or arts and music, I support them all. But those are decisions that should be made by you in this room when you vote for a school board member. I believe in local control. I certainly don't want those decisions, in particular, being made in Washington, telling us what we have to do, or in Concord, telling us on a local school board level what we have to do. And so I think, again, this is probably an area where we have some disagreement, but I'm going to fight for local control.
In the interest of time, we do have to move forward on just a few questions on healthcare. Do you support the continued authorization of Medicaid expansion passed in March? Open it to candidate White.
Yes, I certainly do. It should be made a permanent program. Senator Bradley inserted an amendment to sunset the legislation as a protection for taxpayers. Well, there was no protection for taxpayers at all. The premise was that when funding decreases after the program has been implemented for 3 years, we should take another look at it, because then the feds will only be paying 90%. But even at 90%, we're saving a lot of money. 22,000 people are eligible. 15,000 are already signed up. So if we don't renew it, what happens? They lose their insurance. And when they get sick, they're not going to run to a doctor. They're going to wait till they're really sick, and they're going to go to the emergency room. And you know who pays for that? You do, at retail rates. There's no Medicaid or Medicare in there to bargain for those rates. That's the way it was, and it was costing us money. Now we have something different. Ask the people who finally have insurance how they feel about it. If we should not reauthorize this program, it is going to cost the taxpayers money. It's not going to save anything.
Thank you. Senator Bradley?
Thank you very much. My good friend has called my efforts to make sure that there's accountability from Washington in this Medicaid program a poison pill. I think protecting taxpayers, quite frankly, is not a poison pill. Protecting taxpayers is what we're supposed to do, especially, as I'd remind people in this room, there's a little problem called special education funding that we all know about. And when that special education funding law passed in 1975, the federal government promised 40% of the funding. Even when I was in Congress fighting for more funding, we never got above 17%, and I'm told it's even lower today. And so we need to make sure, if we're going to go forward with this Medicaid program, which I did support with taxpayer protections, that we continue to have those taxpayer protections. And we need to make sure that it works. Quite frankly, it's that simple. Now, you know, sometimes it's tough to try to be the architect of a compromise. This is a bipartisan compromise. Governor Hassan signed it. Several of us as Republicans voted for it. We liked it because it brought private insurance into the state of New Hampshire for this population, something that the governor did not do. We liked it because it had significant taxpayer protection, something the governor's plan didn't have. But that's what compromise is all about, and I think we have to see how it's going to work. And when taxpayers, Mr. White, are on the hook for $350, $400 million, maybe $500 million in costs down the road, we need to make darn sure with this little problem that our nation faces called a $17 trillion debt that Washington can keep its promises. If you send me back, I'm going to make sure that we don't put taxpayers in New Hampshire on the hook for something Washington cannot pay for.
Thank you. I will say it's 7:20 right now, which leaves 5 minutes for closing statements by both of the candidates. I want to say thank you so much for joining us. I will say if there weren't any questions that were answered, I apologize, there were so many that were submitted. I'm sure that you could email both of these fine gentlemen and they would love to get back to you. Thank you all for coming out. I'm very pleased with the turnout, and I would like to hand it over to candidate White for closing statements. You both have 5 minutes.
The differences between me and Senator Bradley should be obvious by now. I am a people person. He's a money person. It's as simple as that. I have never seen the government renege on a program. Oh, I get my Social Security check. You get yours? Yeah, they haven't stopped that. They've paid the Medicare bills right up to now. They've paid the Medicaid bills up to now. I see no reason they would stop. When the government stops paying its bills, we'll be in deep trouble. But the last time the government was in danger of not paying its bills, it was Senator Bradley's party, Mr. Boehner, who was saying, no, we won't fund the government. No, no, no. That was an argument chiefly over Obamacare, as they call it, the Affordable Care Act. But that's another story. Senator Bradley, in his tenure in the Senate, has had some interesting opportunities. Senator Bradley used to be a moderate a long time ago. He was even a Democrat, I'm told. But when the O'Brien wrecking crew came into Congress, Senator Bradley had a chance in the Senate, that influence, to set himself apart, to be a statesman. Instead, he went along with the crowd. He voted to allow concealed carry weapons without permits. He voted to limit abortions. He voted for that notorious school budget. He voted for all of that stuff. Senator Bradley, instead of being the bold savior of the taxpayers that he would have you believe he is, turned into a political windsock. He went with the wind. Now, if you send me to Congress, what you see here is what you'll get there. I'm an old reporter, an old ink-stained wretch. We look at the facts. We sift the beef from the bologna. I've had a lot of experience in that. We know how to find the truth and tell the truth. That was our stock and trade. If you send me to Concord, I'll be a voice for you, the people in Concord, and you will see me. I don't know how often you see Senator Bradley, but I'll tell you this, you will see me in every town in the district at least twice a year. And I'll tell you when I'm going to be there and where I'll be. I enjoy meeting people. I'm for common sense in government. I'm not for baloney. What I'm asking is for a chance to prove to you that I believe in you. I believe in the people of New Hampshire. We can work out our problems together. I trust in the eminent long-term wisdom of the population. So what I'm asking for here tonight is for you to believe in me enough to give me a chance. There are lots of reasons this time around to vote for Democrats and not for Republicans. It's not Republicans we're against. Republicans were in charge in this state for more than 100 years and did a pretty good job of it. I have no issue with real Republicans. I was a Republican back in the days of Rockefeller and Javits and Eisenhower and those people. But the Republican Party left me. My values have stayed the same, and they will be the same, no matter what my label is politically. The Republican Party leadership has been hijacked by Tea Partyists, Free Staters, extremists, and some Democrats have been hijacked there too. There are some disguised as Democrats. They got rid of some of the old line Republicans in primaries. Trust me on that.
Thank you, Candidate White. Senator Bradley?
Okay to applaud.
Not yet. At the very end.
Well, I want to thank all of you for coming out on a beautiful evening here to Kennett. I'd like to thank the Mount Washington Valley and our terrific moderator. She should get a round of applause right now, I think. I've been proud to have served in a number of different capacities over the years. My priorities haven't changed. I'm going to continue to protect taxpayers. I'm going to continue to fight for jobs. I'm going to continue to protect this region from the scourge of donor towns. Those are my top priorities, but we haven't really had a chance to talk about some of the other things I'm proud about doing over the years. My efforts when I was a member of Congress to fight for veterans' health care. And again, as I said previously, I was twice named the VFW Citizen of the Year for my efforts to fight for those who defend our liberties all over the world. I'm proud of that. I'm proud of the fact that with Judd Gregg and John Sununu and Tom Allen and Olympia Snow and Susan Collins, we preserved 5,000 jobs at the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard. That wasn't easy. The Department of Defense had it on a closure list, and we convinced the BRAC Commission to save those 5,000 jobs because that facility was integral to our nation's defense, and it was the most cost-effective. I'm proud of a lot of the environmental legislation I've passed. There's a wilderness designation in the Wild River area. I don't know how many of you have ever been up there, but the wilderness designation makes sure that there won't be logging in this very sensitive area or mechanized vehicles. That's something that will outlast all of us in this room. And I'm pleased to have worked for that, as I've worked for a number of initiatives to protect our shorelands, to protect our loons, to limit environmental pollution over the years. These are things that call for bipartisan cooperation. I'm the majority leader, but whenever there's an opportunity to bring people together, I do that. That gets to good government. And I learned one thing when I was very young in this business in my first term. You can have principled disagreements, but it's usually a good idea to be agreeable when you're disagreeing with someone. And I will continue to do that if you send me back to Concord. Thank you very much.
See you in Wolf.
Yep, you will.
Please drive safely home, everyone, and please enter back through the cafeteria the way you came in. Thank you for joining us tonight.